Hey guys, Cooking Medic here. I've been posting around on the DayZ subreddit lately, and I keep seeing this kind of thread come up. And it always seems to get this kind of comment. So I'm here today to clear the air about DayZ's medical system. I've been playing DayZ since the Arma 2 days. I'm a combat medic in the real world, so I'm gonna say that my best practices are pretty decent and effective. So I've taken this in-game knowledge, combined them with my real-world experience, and put those together for all of you in one cohesive guide. I've left timestamps in the description for anybody who came here looking for help on a specific topic, so let's begin. First off, DayZ has a very complex medical system compared to other survival games. The first thing we need to cover are our core stats, so let's break this down into sections. The first is health. Health is the most important stat to tend to, as every other stat contributes to your overall health. So in turn, every action you take as a medic should ultimately serve to increase or preserve the health of your patient. Lose it all, and your patient dies. Health is a stat that ranges from 0 to 100. At 0, you're dead. 1 to 40, you're considered seriously injured. 41 to 60 is moderately injured. 61 to 80 is slightly injured. And 81 to 100 is considered healthy. These statuses impact your movement speed. The more injured you are, the slower you'll move. It also impacts how much stamina you have for sprinting. It's important to note that health can be lost instantaneously. It isn't intrinsically tied to your blood stat. Gunshots, for example, do an average of 31 damage to health upon impact. And in a similar way, there is no item that instantly regains health. You have to regenerate it over time. Health regeneration is tied to a few stats, namely your blood, hydration, food, and temperature. The better you take care of yourself, the faster you regenerate lost health. We can draw a simple conclusion from this knowledge. When providing care to our patient, we can control a few things, but we can't control how much health they initially lost due to their injuries. So our top priority is making sure they don't lose more of it. Number 2 is blood. Blood is the second most important stat that we're worried about. The amount of blood in a character's body ranges from 0 to 5,000. The level of blood affects your screen saturation, and of course, if you lose enough, you die. The more blood you lose, the more gray your screen will become. When you fall below 3,000 blood, your character will see in black and white, and you'll begin to take shock damage at a rate of 5.9 per second, until you fall unconscious. If a player falls unconscious, they will remain unconscious until bleeding stops, or blood is regenerated. At 0 to 2,500 blood, the player is at risk of dying, and at 0 blood, the player dies. Some blood can be lost immediately upon suffering an injury, though this isn't your primary concern. Your primary concern should always be wounds. Wounds cause bleeding to the character and range in severity. There's only one way to stop the bleed, and that's through bandaging. You can bandage utilizing either bandage rolls or rags crafted from clothing items. You must continue to bandage until your patient is no longer bleeding, otherwise they will continue to lose blood. Another, less common cause of blood loss is chemical poisoning. Players come down with chemical poisoning as a result of drinking, you guessed it, chemicals. If your buddy decide to chug a bottle of gasoline, alcohol tincture, and disinfectant, make him chew on some charcoal tablets. Unlike health, there are ways we can immediately regain blood. We achieve this with intravenous access, or IVs. IVs consist of saline and blood transfusions. The safest treatment we can offer in DayZ is the saline bag. It multiplies blood regeneration by 5 for 3 minutes, while also providing a boost to hydration. To use a saline bag, you'll need to combine it with an IV start kit. This will allow you to either utilize it on a patient or yourself. Saline can work in a pinch, but it's slower than a blood bag. If possible, this is best saved for ambulatory patients to help them recover faster. But if your buddy is down after a firefight, use whatever you have on hand. Blood transfusions are a lot more involved than a saline IV and come with a great deal of risk. If you give a patient the incorrect blood type, then this can cause a hemolytic reaction. This condition will cause a player to lose 8 blood per second and go unconscious. It is often fatal. There is no cure for a hemolytic reaction, so handle blood products with great care. The first thing you need to do as a team medic is to find blood test kits and start identifying and writing down people's blood types. This way we can cross-analyze who's compatible with who and collect accordingly. Blood compatibility is outlined in this chart from the wiki. In summary, O negative can donate to anybody, and AB negative can receive from anybody. O positive can only donate to other positive blood types. For every other blood type, just think positives to positives, negatives to negatives. A can give to A or AB, and B can give to B or AB. Once you've identified blood types in your team, it's best to collect blood in advance. If you have an O negative player in your group, he's your new walking blood bank. Keep him well fed and hydrated, and routinely collect blood bags from him using a blood collection kit. Otherwise, each player can routinely collect blood bags from themselves and keep it in their gear for easy access. A lone wolf player can do something similar to have blood readily available in emergencies. Blood in DayZ does not spoil or go bad, so stock up on it before a firefight. In order to transfuse blood to a player, utilize an IV start kit and a blood bag. When you do so, make sure to double check what type of blood you're using and which patient you're transfusing it to. Number 3 is temperature. Temperature affects every other stat in the game. There are 2 temperature statuses we need to worry about: hypothermia and hyperthermia. Hyperthermia isn't a huge concern in DayZ, where the player is primarily outside braving the elements in ragged clothing. So let's discuss hypothermia instead. The player gains the status hypothermic if their temperature falls too low. On your temperature icon, this is what happens when it falls into the blue zone. During mild hypothermia, food and water consumption rates will be increased and stamina will be lowered. The rate at which the player recovers health will also be lowered. During severe hypothermia, the player will lose health until he dies. So how do we keep warm? Fires, obviously, will rapidly raise a player's temperature. However, there are other factors at play. For starters, when a player is wet, either from rain or bodies of water, he will lose temperature rapidly. Different clothing also has different insulation levels, which are affected by the condition of the player's clothing. If a player's clothing is ruined, it's about as useful as wearing nothing at all. This has implications both in preventative medicine and in combat trauma, as temperature has the capacity to lower player health or hinder how quickly they recover it. Number 4, food and water. Now you might be thinking, hold on, food and water isn't medicine, and you'd be wrong. Dead wrong. Because food and water is necessary for the player to survive, yes, but when either hits the red zone, players lose health until they die. Food and water also impacts how quickly blood and health recover, so it's paramount that you keep yourself and your guys well fed and well hydrated, especially before a firefight, because the rate at which you recover blood and health can be the difference between life and death when you hit first contact. Alright, we've covered our core stats. Now let's get into the meat and potatoes. The most important part of the DayZ medical system is preventative medicine. If you're not on your game with keeping your guys healthy, they're less likely to survive after first contact. Or worse, die from something preventable and stupid. This is where everyday maintenance comes into play. I've put together a list of checks you can conduct on yourself or your squad. Food and hydration are paramount here in order to keep each player healthy and ensure that they regain lost health and blood in a timely manner. Ensure each player is eating and drinking enough. Ensure that food and water is rationed accordingly, and make sure players aren't saving too much food. Your hunger bar might be full, but you can fill it much, much further with calories than the UI would suggest. Ensure that you and your team are eating just about everything you find right when you find it. There's little reason to save it for later. Next is temperature. Make sure to repair clothing as quickly as you can, or swap it for warmer clothes in better condition. When it starts raining, take shelter and build a fire in a concealed position in order to dry off clothing. Keep moving as much as possible to keep your temperature in the white range. This also prevents disease, as cold and flu is caused by low temperatures. Once a player contracts a cold or the flu, he is likely to spread it to others in the team. Also make sure to check your team's feet. Shoes wear down over time and can cause bleeding once ruined. Make sure your team is swapping out for new shoes regularly to avoid this. And lastly, sanitation. DayZ is full of diseases, so make sure you and your team are staying clean. Make sure to sanitize all of your medical equipment with disinfectant spray or alcohol tincture. Diseases can spread from your equipment to yourself or your patient in DayZ. In order to prevent wound infection, make sure to disinfect all of your IV start and blood collection kits, blood and saline bags, and rags and bandages. Also make sure to disinfect your gloves after butchering an animal and the knife you use to butcher in order to prevent cholera. Disinfecting drinking containers and cooking equipment also isn't a bad idea. Water gathered from pumps in towns will always be clean, same with water drank from soda cans or gained from eating food. When you find a container with water, stop. Do not drink it, as they almost always spawn dirty. Even if you find water in a player's body, make sure to either purify it with water purification tablets, boil it, or dump it out and replace it with pump water. Drinking dirty water can result in the player contracting cholera. When butchering an animal, ensure that you are wearing gloves. Failure to wear gloves will bloody your hands. If you eat with bloodied hands, you will almost certainly contract cholera and die. Make sure all food is cooked to 90 degrees Celsius or until it's gained the status baked. Consuming raw food will lead to the player contracting salmonella. And lastly, don't eat people. Didn't think we'd have to talk about this one, guys. Consumption of human flesh leads to a disease called a brain prion. This will cause the player to shake uncontrollably and break into random fits of laughter, alerting players and the infected alike. When a player has contracted a disease, it's important to identify it and treat it in order to prevent ill effects or death. Cholera is a disease caused by drinking contaminated water, eating with bloodied hands, or handling infected equipment before eating. Symptoms include vomiting, which lowers food and hydration. Often, players with cholera will die of dehydration/starvation quickly. Treatment for cholera is tetracycline pills, an antibiotic found in clinics and hospitals. Salmonella is a disease caused by eating raw or undercooked meat. Symptoms include vomiting. Treatment is charcoal tablets. Chemical poisoning is caused by drinking alcohol tincture, disinfectant spray, or gasoline. Its symptoms include blood loss and vomiting. Treatment includes charcoal tablets. Cold and flu presents roughly the same way by causing the player to sneeze and cough. These diseases spread rapidly and are treated with good nutrition and water and vitamin pills. The flu often results in a fever, which can be read with a medical thermometer. Heart attacks are a random, rare disease in DayZ. Treatment for heart attacks should include epinephrine, a defibrillator, and CPR if necessary. Heart attacks are almost always fatal if left untreated. Symptoms include a weak, irregular pulse and unconsciousness. Quick side note, multivitamin pills can help a player avoid infection if used preventatively. Multivitamin pills can also speed up recovery of infectious illness. This is because there's a hidden stat in DayZ known as your immune system, and the stronger your immune system is, the less likely you are to get diseases and the quicker you recover from them. So you can utilize multivitamin pills to boost that immune system, but additionally, if you're already infected, it quickens how quickly you recover from the disease by 3 minutes every time you have the medicated status from taking them. Alright, enough about preventive med. Let's talk about the good stuff. Trauma medicine. First things first, gear. If you're functioning as a medic or just trying to keep yourself alive for the long run, medical equipment is very important. For protective equipment, you should always at a minimum carry surgical gloves. This will help protect you from infection when treating other players, and will protect the other player as well if you can keep them clean. This way you're not rooting around in their insides with your old leather work gloves that you've skinned 40 herds of sheep with. You have a dedicated set of surgical gloves for each person in your team that you specifically use to treat that person, and then you throw them away. For diagnostic equipment, the trusty thermometer is always a good thing to have on hand. Then we have treatment items. I've broken these down into a few categories. Bleeding control. This includes bandages and rags in order to stop players from bleeding. Trauma medications. These include epinephrine, which instantly wakes up unconscious players as long as their blood level is over 500. Then we have 2 medications for pain control, codeine and morphine. Pain control is important as pain can cause players to move slower, limp, and be worse at aiming. Beware, however, too much can be fatal. Only administer 1 dose at a time as it's needed. Splinting. In DayZ, a player's limbs can break due to a fall or injury. This will cause the player to take shock damage when walking, forcing them to crawl to avoid going unconscious. In order to treat this, a splint must be crafted and applied. A team medic should always carry ready-made splints in their bag. Temperature control. Ensure you are always carrying heat packs in order to rapidly treat a player for hypothermia. You can place activated heat packs into a player's clothing to raise their temperature. If heat packs are unavailable, you can always build a fire. That way you can raise the player's temperature after the fact. IV access. Blood bags, saline bags, IV star kits, blood collection kits, and blood type test kits are a must, regardless of if you're playing by yourself or with a team. Defibrillator. If you have the room, carry 1 just in case in order to treat a heart attack. But heart attacks are so rare that you'll probably never encounter them, so they should only be carried if you have the room and the manpower to carry food for you. So we've covered DayZ's important stats, medical supplies and how they work, and how to keep your team healthy and ready for action. But, oh shit!
Wait, I think I see a laying down guy. Is that a laying down player? Yeah, that is. Oh, I'm getting shot at.
Okay. Did you survive?
I'm alive. I'm dead. I'm down. I'm not dead, but I'm downed.
You've hit first contact, and one of your teammates is down. As an aspiring DayZ team medic, you're probably excited to steal the show, but you're also probably worried you're about to fuck it up. So you might ask yourself, what do I do? I've got you covered. I've put together a system of best practices, prioritizing what's most likely to kill your patient to least likely. We'll call this system BCT, for bleeding, circulation, and temperature. We'll divide the BCT system into 3 phases. The first phase will be care under fire. The second phase will be field care. And the third phase will be recovery care. For our first phase, our priority is securing our patient. We need to keep the enemy from further injuring the patient, and if possible, move them to safety. The most effective way to do this is to kill the enemy. For our more drawn-out firefights, time doesn't always permit this, so let's focus on recovering our ally. We can't drag unconscious players in DayZ, so we need to focus on securing the site where he was down. The rest of your team should be actively covering you. You, as the medic, should always carry smoke grenades to conceal your movement, popping them in the way of the enemy's sight line between themselves and your patient. Tell your team when you're going to move, and have them return fire in order to pull attention away from you. Sprint as quickly as possible from cover to cover, and then crouch or prone on your downed friend. Then we're going to execute the B and C portion of our system. B. Control bleeding by bandaging until the player has no more wounds and is no longer bleeding. C. Start a blood bag or IV line on the patient to raise his blood level to over 500. At this point, attempt to administer epinephrine periodically until the player regains consciousness. Then instruct the player to follow you or to move to cover. Once the player is in cover, the choice can be made to either retreat or win the fight. When the fight is over, either by retreating or killing the enemy, we can enter the field care phase, when we're no longer taking fire or at risk of getting killed. During field care, we're going to reassess our B and C, tend to his temperature, work on tertiary injuries, and provide pain control and medications. Follow the following steps. B. Reassess to make sure that the player is no longer bleeding and has no more wounds that you need to treat. C. Check the player's pulse and communicate with them regarding blood level. Provide blood until the player's pulse is strong and their blood is at least 3/4 recovered. T. Provide the player with heat packs in order to raise their temperature to prevent additional loss of health. Next, we'll apply splints to any broken limbs. Then we'll administer pain control to the patient in the form of either morphine or codeine. And finally, we'll provide our patient with tetracycline in order to prevent or treat any wound infections or diseases that he might have contracted from your dirty hands during treatment. Once he's patched up, we can focus on the recovery phase of treatment and move on. In order to allow your patient to recover, refer back to the preventative medicine part of the video. Ensure the patient is well clothed, stays dry, well fed, and well hydrated. Ensure to assess regularly for wound infection by checking temperature. Treat any infections with more tetracycline. So in summary, broken down in an easy to follow checklist: care under fire, provide smoke and covering fire, move to the patient, stop the bleeding, and provide the patient with blood, administer epinephrine, and instruct the patient to move. Field care, reassess the player's bleeding, administer blood and saline until the player is at least 3/4 full, provide the player with a hot pack/fire, splint any broken limbs, provide the player with codeine/morphine, provide the player with tetracycline. And that's it. So long as you can stay alive, follow this guide, and not crack under pressure when you meet first contact, you too can keep a team, or yourself, alive. Thanks for checking out this guide. If you liked it, like it. If you disliked it, dislike it. And if you learned something new or think I forgot to include something that you want to know about, leave a comment. Odds are, I'll reply to it with further explanation. Good luck out there.